Can you hear me? Is it working now? Still no audio. Okay, hold on. I might have to restart the stream. Okay, is the audio still working? Is the audio working now? Okay, perfect. Okay, good, good, good. All right, sorry about that. I was talking for like 10 minutes. Okay, anyway, let me go ahead and pull up the CPI and everything again really quick. So I do want to talk about that. Okay, so we did have the CPI come in slightly cooler today. We did anticipate it. The forecast was anticipating it as well, but it did come in quite cooler than what even the forecast was anticipating. So overall, that should be very good for at least treasuries. Um, with that being good for treasuries, and I kind of want to circle back to this point in a second, but we had the 30-year bond auction yesterday, and it came in pretty good. The yield actually pulled downward with all the hawkish data we had on Wednesday with, you know, absolutely absurd numbers. I'm sure some of those have to be revised downward. Oh, we could already see, hold on. This already get revised downward? I'm not sure what happened with this because this was plus 125,000. So I'm not sure if that already was revised. Anyway, that's weird. The data overall has been fairly hawkish for the week. So seeing the 30-year bond auction come down was actually quite shocking. That's actually very, very good for the treasury market overall and for the equities market. Yields pulling downward is very indicative of continued rate cuts. So with all this cool data, it definitely helps the narrative of know, Fed cutting rates. Now in the pre-market is doing not the worst, not the best. We had Applied Materials have their earnings last night, and they did very well. I believe they're up around 11% currently, so that will be pulling a lot of weight into semiconductors, even though we are still seeing, a lot of selling signals overall. So tech, not the best. We still have some names that are red in here, but again, Applied Materials is going to be holding a lot of weight currently. It's not an American company, but it still is a very, very key and crucial semiconductor. Okay, with that said, I want to very, very quickly go through kind of what the scenario is for the day, just based off of, the moving averages and Bollinger Bands. So looking at QQQ, either one, we will be pushing into that lower Bollinger, which it will be closing that inverse cup right here to the 594. Okay, so basically 595, push down, very likely secure that 593 range. I don't assume we're going to push down all the way to the 580 just yet. Um, with how aggressive yesterday's selling was though, it's not exactly out of the question. I don't think we're going to get a negative 2.53% type day right now, but we will kind of monitor everything just to make sure we're not going to, especially with Applied Materials having such a strong earnings, with the CPI coming in slightly cooler, it shouldn't push the market down too much further. But again, that's kind of the scenario. Either we're going to reclaim this 5 mile, which currently the 5 mile on QQQ is at 609.84. Very likely will be pulling down around the 607, maybe even the 606 range. So It's either we're going to be pushing up towards that 5 mile, or we will be pushing down into the lower Bollinger. And that should be pretty much same with SPY. Yeah, we got the same SPY right here. It would be that 75 range for SPY though. Now let's go ahead and take a look at all of our important stuff. Just taking a look at Apple really quick because I know many have been asking me about that. Again, if the sell-off is going to continue, that can change things, but currently this is a cup forming a handle. Overall, a bullish structure, but we have been seeing a lot of bullish structures being invalidated. So don't put a whole lot of credence into that. Coin starting to do better. XY still below the 97. CFXY pulling down slightly. So yesterday, I'm pretty sure yesterday was mostly the Bank of Japan having to unwind. Reason why I say that is because the yen has just been absolutely rising yesterday, which generally it rises when the Bank of Japan is having to intervene. So they're buying up the yen, they're trying to create strength for it. And to do that, they have to sort of sell off the rest of the market. Semiconductors, they did reject their upper Bollinger yesterday. 5 mont is at 352.88 with the close being at 351.50. The 5 mont is basically going to be right at that 351.70, 352 range. So really not far at all. Technically, semiconductors are currently above the 5 mont, so if that is a successful 5 mont test to the upside, that would allude to tech, and the SPY continuing upward. We are seeing, again, semiconductors are doing very well in the pre-market to applied materials. TLT should probably be doing very well. Yep, doing very well on the CPI drop. That was very good for the yields, probably pulling the 10-year down closer to the 4.1%. Go ahead and circle to this really quick. Hope it's actually below the 4.1%, so that's very, very good for the market. This 4.1% range on the 10-year yield has been super, super sticky. So pulling below this is very good. Um, it's surprising that this is the moment now that's causing this to pull down. Um, Sometimes that's how it happens. Let's check oil. I want to circle around to Netflix because I know many are interested in Netflix right now. Oil doing okay in the pre-market. Nothing too crazy though. In around 20 minutes, we'll be starting to look for any decent scalps or anything for the open. But for now, I am just letting the coffee kick in while we just look at stuff. So for Netflix, Potentially, we can be pushing down to the weekly lower Bollinger again. That would be around the 72 range. However, with the daily time frame, we are having a lower Bollinger push, which means that technically today would be day two of the lower Bollinger, meaning that it would be a buying opportunity. Now, with Netflix, the buying opportunities haven't been super, super great, but the 5 mile buys still have been very strong. As you can see, each lower Bollinger buy still has been securing the 5 mile at least, and sometimes the 20 mile. As you can see, another 5 mile test in there, 5 mile test. So there's a lot of 5 mile tests going on in here, with these lower Bollinger moves. Structurally, we have a ton of liquidity right here. Now, does that mean they're wanting to push into that range and start trading at that range? Not entirely sure. Um, what I do know is that buying these lower Bollinger moves is still the ticket because even when we were on the run upwards, if you bought into these lower Bollinger moves, would have been making absolute bank. So lower Bollinger still the key to buying the dip. Um, I don't think this is going to dip a whole lot more, but again, lower Bollinger day two, we should expect a lower low. With this on the weekly time frame being very, very close towards the lower Bollinger, it can push into that. Um, I don't really anticipate that though. I am seeing this selling starting to weaken a little bit. These moves for support look like they've been trying to get larger and larger. So I would be trying to take the dip on Netflix. In terms of options, I wouldn't do anything short term. I would try to do something at least a month out, 2 months out in terms of the call side, just because equities are having, a slower period of time. We do have sell-offs occurring right now, as you can see. Basically, Netflix has been selling off since the middle of last year. So, are you going to catch the absolute bottom? I'm not entirely sure yet, but I do know that in order to do so, you do have to buy these lower Bollinger moves. So, precious metals doing good in the pre-market. Something to be aware of here on semiconductors is that potentially we could be forming a head and shoulders here. This is the 30-minute time frame. But again, we still have this very large cup. Still believe it's on SPY and QQQ as well. QQ still has the cup, not fully invalidated yet. It has to pull all the way back down towards that 587 to really invalidate this previous cup. Um, but it definitely can. The liquidity is entirely here to do so. So if it wants to pull down, form an inverse cup, definitely can happen. Silver still very good for the buy. Now, potentially silver can be pushing down into this lower Bollinger. I don't really anticipate it. Generally, when you see the precious metals push below this 20 mile range, usually that's when you have your major buying opportunities. I know that it's kind of hard to see with some of these candles here, but even previously for the really, really large rally, every time we'd get to the, below the 20 ma, excuse me, it was still an extremely strong buy for silver. And I believe that echoes with gold as well. It does, gold and silver generally do not like to trade below the 20 ma very often. So if you can catch it below that range, generally it's a buying opportunity, at least historically. Do I think you're buying the top by buying under the 20 ma here? No, I really don't. I actually did add some silver shares yesterday. Good morning, everybody. TLT seeing a lot of weight gain. Um, I've been very hesitant to be telling people to enter TLT contracts, mainly because we've been seeing a mixture of very hawkish and dovish news at the same time. We also have a new Fed chair coming in. We have a ton of different economic variables going on. We have a ton of different global macro conditions going on. And truly, I think a lot of this weight in TLT currently is due to the Bank of Japan. Again, this is moving exactly in tandem with the yen, with the DXY, with the USD JPY. Um, it's showing that exact movement of the unwinding. So for them unwinding, generally that means selling off equities, selling off Bitcoin. Sometimes they do sell off treasuries, but it's different note denominations. And generally they try to buy into the long end bills. So that is why we are very likely seeing TLT rise. I don't really think this is US investors. I think this is, again, mostly foreign investors. Now, it's not exactly time to go bullish. Um, However, a lot of this selling that's been happening has been selling into buyers. So it might seem like they're trying to sell the top off the market. However, um, a lot of this weight has been bought into, which has been a very large signal that's been kind of throwing me off. And the reason why we know this weight is being bought into is because, moment, the HIG has been very, very strong still. This is the high yield corporate bond ETF, so this tracks the high yield corporate debt. If equities are really, really, really going to start dumping off, then you wouldn't be seeing buying on the top end. Um, this would be basically buying the absolute top. And for the bond market, they don't like to do that. They are very, very, very peculiar of what they buy or sell. So seeing buying of, um, you know, corporate bonds still at the top end like this is not usual. We are seeing the ADL pulling down slightly, so we are having a little bit of selling, but it's nothing like these prior events where we had the unwinding of, 2024. That was back during this period. Doesn't look like a whole lot of selling in here, but for HIG, that is a lot of selling. Currently, we're not seeing that type of selling. Um, Within the sell-off of, earlier last year, we saw the HIG pull down very, very aggressively as well. Sorry, my cat's driving me crazy. Give me one moment. I have to let her out of the room. Apologize for that. Anyway, so we're seeing the high yield corporate bonds very well, and these are called the quote unquote junk bonds, but they're really not junk. It's corporations selling them rather than United States, so they don't have some super AAA rating. But they're still top of the line bonds. With that said, we also see liquid buying upward, which is investment grade corporate bonds. I don't see why you'd be buying investment grade corporate bonds when potentially the stock market is going to absolutely plummet. Um, I don't know any single manager that would want to do that. This is not a hedge to equity weakness. So, again, this is another strong signal telling me that very, very likely we're not going to be seeing some massive selling in here just yet. At least I'm not seeing that signal currently. With the DXY, the FXY, again the FXY is the yen. This is showing the unwinding, um, with this gaining weight again from that 57 low. This is showing that the Bank of Japan is having to intervene, having to strengthen their currency. With the pre-market actually being pulled down slightly, it might be showing that they might be easing up slightly. Now, again, I do believe the Bank of Japan is trying to sell into buyers rather than trying to absolutely crash the market. Um, Seeing a lot of bullish signals to a lot of this bearishness, which, yes, I've been bullish overall. I know that this is February, standard not bullish month, but still bullish structure, excuse me, and still bullish conditions that are present. And as long as those are present, we still have to be aware of them. Now, we will start looking for a trade here, probably the next 5 to 10 minutes. I just want to really get a good feel for where it is for today. Again, we're seeing a lot of weight being pushed into semiconductors right now. Applied Materials had a very good earning. Bitcoin really does need to see some strength. Now, I know Bitcoin doesn't go one-in-one correlation with the market, but equities are very tied to Bitcoin because um, institutions are pretty much the owner of Bitcoin now, so it moves pretty much in tandem. SPY, QQQ, all the big indices. So generally, if Bitcoin is selling off, usually the equities and everything kind of follow that same trend. So if we can see buying in Bitcoin, that would be a bullish signal. So far, it's really much of anything. Still pushing into that lower Bollinger, which again, lower Bollinger buys are still best time to buy. Um, just have to be very cautious because if this selling picks up, if this, continues into a full-on sell off like last year, then this dip can dip a lot further. Again, I'm not seeing those signals just yet. I would be looking for a lot more shaking within the credit markets that we're just really not observing yet. Precious metals, they did have a sell-off. but I'm still seeing a lot of weight regained on them. The treasury buying is really the signal that's telling me that it's very likely foreign investors. I don't see any reason domestic investors would be buying into the current narrative or the current news unless they just had actual numbers that said otherwise. Take a look at the heat map again. I can stop getting pop-ups. One moment. Okay, heat map. This is the pre-market, so looking a lot better. Um, before the CPI was released, it was fairly red, but now we're seeing a lot of green. Again, we're not out of the woods yet. We will be monitoring the VIX and everything else to really ensure that, whether this volatility is going to increase or not, to be on top of it today. So that's our goal. But overall, I do see some support being gained. Again, kind of hammering this point in, but Applied Materials had a very, very good earnings. It is up almost 12% currently in the pre-market. That's going to be holding an absolute absurd amount of weight into the overall of tech and semiconductors. Even though Applied Materials isn't an American company, doesn't have the American market cap, it's still one of the most important companies on the planet. So, um, you know, it does hold a lot of weight. Its earnings being such a strong earnings is definitely going to play a part in what happens today. Now, here's kind of some of the signals that I'm looking for to determine if today's going to be bullish or bearish, okay? One, we start with, the VVIX. And granted, we'll see this when, the opening price actually changes. But yesterday, this was still very, very elevated. And I will show my, once again, just to get everybody on the same page. But with the VVIX, as long as it's above this 98 range, that means very, very likely you're going to be seeing selling within the market. Yesterday, this pulled down towards the 100 range, and we were seeing a lot of chopping at that 100, right at the beginning of the day. So that's what was at, initially telling me that potentially we could be having a bullish day. Potentially we could be seeing this crossover and pushing down below the 98. Well, obviously that didn't occur. Obviously it pulled up quite a bit yesterday. So with it being very, very elevated right now, one, the VVIX can move very, very quickly. So even though it is at 112 currently, if the market wants to go bullish, this can absolutely pull down to the 98, even the 88 within a single session. So we're really looking for the VVIX to pull down pretty immensely. Um, don't want to be trying to buy dips and everything if this is going to be continuing upward. There's no point to that. That's just telling you that the big money is having to ensure future, their SPACs futures. So with this price moving upward, this is actually showing that insurance prices are moving upward, unlike the actual VIX. The VIX is just monitoring, um, how many calls and puts are being sold on the S&P. So VIX can be a little misleading compared to the VIX, where this is monitoring actual inflow of, funds on the insurance. So they're looking for the VVIX to pull downward. TLT had a lot of data supporting it today. However, we are looking for a weaker TLT day. TLT has been pushed into the upper Bollinger, um, so we still can see a higher high or we see the pull downward. Let's be aware of that. On QQQ, and we're right at this chop range, but this is a really, really crucial range because it's right lower Bollinger and 5 mile. So 5 mile again will be pulling down towards that 606, 607 range. And really, if we're going to be seeing the push upward, that's the range I'll be taking. If not, if we're going to be seeing volatility picked up, then it will be this 594 gap, close the cup to the downside, and take that gap. But if that doesn't happen, this can be a very nice lower Bollinger rejection towards the upside. So it's not entirely wrong to be bullish on this. It's just we again have to be very, very cautious of all the different signals going on. And the same situation with SPY. Now we are going to start looking for a scalp within the next 10-20 minutes. Again, we will be using the 5 minute time frame. We're looking for something that is pushed massively above or below the lower Bollinger on the 5 minute time frame, and that actually supports it, excuse me, with the ADL moving in the same direction. Oh, it was applied materials. Sorry, can you guys hear me? I don't know if my microphone's messing up today or not. It's applied materials. It's AMAT. Go ahead and pull up the symbol. So it is this one. It's not an American company. It's a European company. Um, but again, it's super, super, super important. It's just doesn't have the American market cap. If this was an American company, this thing would easily be within the trillions of market cap. So, um, massive company, very, very crucial for what it does and what it provides to semiconductors, throughout the globe. Bitcoin still seeing a little selling, DXY pulling down. We do have to be a little cautious with the DXY. Um, thing I want to show is that when the Bank of Japan starts unwinding, the dollar actually falls with the yen because remember they're having to um sell a lot of equities, securities, anything for the dollar to buy the yen. Okay, so when we see this unwinding occur, we will be seeing the dollar pulling down very, very aggressively too. Because that's showing that there's an influx of dollars within the system. And with the dollar pulling downward, we should be seeing the yen pulling upward with it. Okay, at the exact same time. We would also be seeing the USD JPY pulling downward. It would not be seeing strength at all. So just be aware of that. These are sort of signals to look for if we're going to be seeing the Bank of Japan continue unwinding positions. We will monitor the VVIX at open. UVIX and UVIXY, the pre-market, are pulling down slightly. We do have the US 10-year pulling down very, very good. Again, this range right here, I wish I could circle it, but Webull does not allow me to draw on the treasuries. This range right here has been insanely sticky for the market. Pulling below this range again is very, very good. This is showing that this top end trend is still holding extremely strong, and this is something that many within the treasury market were worried about pulling back upward pretty immensely. So with the US 10-year pulling down, this definitely pulls a lot of weight into equities as well. Oh, no worries. Again, we're seeing some good signals overall. Um, Not overly bullish, not overly bearish. We're just very, very neutral right now until we see, closer to the open, see some of the actual volatility instruments and everything moving. But we will try to secure a very nice scalp on the day. We're seeing LMT uh, having a little bit of weakness in the pre-market. Not a whole ton, but they are having a little bit of weakness. And again, LMT is a defensive. Generally, this is something you pour money into if the market's going to dump. So, um, not seeing massive weight being poured into this currently. Again, liquid is doing great. Big is doing great. So, um, not seeing a whole lot of risk on the credit side. Bitcoin is still a massive concern. Again, Bitcoin is very, very tied to institutional buyers, so I do kind of watch this quite a bit in terms of whether equities are going to be buying or selling, because generally Bitcoin will follow that trend. ASTS, I believe we talked about this yesterday, how potentially today it could be excuse me, a very strong buy. With that lower Bollinger Day 2 occurring, um, that would be today, we would expect a lower low, and from that lower low, consolidation back up to the 5 mile. Okay. So ASTS is potentially becoming a quality trade, maybe even for swings next week, honestly. I might be looking for call swings if that pulls down enough. And I'm going to go ahead and start taking a look at the 5-minute time frame throughout majority of the market. Again, we're going to be looking for, a high volume, high market cap symbol that is either pushed highly above the upper Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame or, very, very below the 5-minute time frame. I'm going to be muted for about 2 minutes. I just want to drink some coffee really quick while we go through these symbols. Oh, sorry, I had my mic muted still. No, just looking at some plays right now for the pre-market. Boom. Again, I'm just looking at structure, trying to see if we see anything majorly pushed up or below the upper or lower Bollinger. Microsoft really needs to regain a lot of weight. This is going to be a huge key in determining whether the sell-off continues or not. If Microsoft can really hold this 402 range and push above it, then the sell-off should be halted pretty immensely. Micron might be turning into a good buy here. Hold on. See, I used to play Micron a lot. Back when it was cheap, the good old days. Sorry, it just gives me memories because this is back in what, 2000, 2024. I remember we were trading it back at 77. Good times. Okay, anyway. Micron. Micron having some pretty decent downside here. However, the 5 mile will still be pulling upward on the day. So technically that is bullish. 10 mile will still be pulling upward. The 20 mile will still be pulling upward. The 5 mile will be around, I want to say the 401, maybe 402 range. The market is down. Sorry, I'm looking at this because potentially this could be a really nice call. Even though I know the market is a little shaky, so we just have to be a little careful when engaging calls. Not entirely set on this yet. I want to see a little bit more movement, but if someone reminds me, I would love to circle back to that after open. Netflix, even on the 5 minute time frame, is creating a really strong buy here. Again, we should expect a lower low today. Um, Currently, the pre-market is giving that to us, but we should be expecting a push downward a little bit further. From that push downward, calls are very, very likely going to be good. I would not be getting short duration calls. Again, I would really, really, really try to get for about a month out. Equity buys at this range are going to be very strong too. So if you're an equity holder, a couple shares of this in your long-term account, very, very smart here. 10 minutes until the open, so I'm going to, excuse me, I'm gonna fly through this a little bit quicker. It's because I do want to secure some decent trades in here. QQQ actually does have a very nice cup and handle on the 5-minute time frame. I'm not going to engage that just because, again, I am looking for the push either above the upper Bollinger or below the upper Bollinger or below the lower Bollinger. Um, I'm really not interested in the 20 mile engagements as much just because the direction isn't entirely set. It can still push downward or upward at that rate. Silver is making a cup and handle. Again, talked about those lower Bollinger buys or the below the 20 mile buys on the daily time frame, but still heavily stand by that. Should absolutely be adding silver shares to your long. Semiconductors looking very good. The calls from yesterday should actually still be doing absolutely fine. Seeing a lot of these cup and handles throughout SPY, tech, semiconductors. Now, this is a risk, but I actually think this is something I might want to engage on, is taking a TLT put. Yes, TLT is pushing very hard right now. If the Bank of Japan is going to continue unwinding, they will absolutely push this position off you, they will basically burn that position. So be very, very cautious if you do try to take this trade. However, today we're seeing a higher high into the upper Bollinger Day 2. Generally, that should give you a very quality short back to the 5 mile. 5 mile is about a whole $1.70 away, so we still have quite a bit of room within TLT. Especially if we have a bullish day like potentially we could be seeing here, then again, if the Bank of Japan is not going to be continuing the selling today, then very, very likely the TLT would be tapering out, could be creating a short opportunity. Not entirely sure if I'll engage on that or not, but it's something I'm definitely interested in. Nothing screaming at me too much yet. There was that TLT trade. Do you see the USD JPY pushing down into the lower Bollinger? Um, which again, that kind of suggests that there should be some upside to it today. That does sort of allude to somewhat bullish action within the market. Our volatility instruments are still a little elevated. Again, we're looking for the VVIX to really, really pull downward today if we're going to be expecting bullishness. Seeing the energy sector pull down. So again, this is more of a defensive type pick. So seeing defensives in the red generally tends to mean that that money is going to be moving elsewhere. Um, and with that elsewhere, we're trying to determine if that's going to be entirely into the equity or entirely into the treasury market, or if they are going to try to buy the tech dip. So that's really what we're looking at right now. Boeing pushed very well above the upper Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame, below the 5-minute or below the 5 mile. So technically this can be a 5 mile rejection down. So technically this could be a decent short to take. I won't be taking it, but the potential is there. There's a really good one. I believe it was Charter. I don't know if it was the daily time frame we were looking at. We were looking at this Head and Shoulders on the 5 minute time frame. Yeah, I just up here so you guys could see the name while I was muted. Um, we had this really nice Head and Shoulders going here. And not only do we have this really nice Head and Shoulders going here, it's this Head and Shoulders that's sitting above a very, very important liquidity range, which is this up. Okay, so potentially we could be forming a handle downward. We are seeing the structure to do so. We do anticipate um, bear structure at the top of a cup. So we are seeing that bear structure. Potentially this can be a really nice short position. Um, Maybe even a swing into next week. Let's kind of see what the options are looking like. About 400, 500 bucks for a put. But again, the opportunity is there. It looks decent. Trying to find a nice scalp here, but not seeing anything poking out too much just yet. So are we all kind of on the same page for the open? Good morning, everybody. Still having trouble with the sound. I apologize. I'm gonna have to fix that for Monday's stream. I think it's because one of my programs I closed um might have to do with adjusting my microphone and everything. So next time I'll just make sure not to close that. Okay, so we have 3 minutes till open. I'm not seeing anything popping out super, super great just yet. Johnson& Johnson could be a call opportunity, but I really don't like the contracts on Johnson& Johnson one bit. Lily can create a scalp, but it looks like it's already starting to buy up the lower Bollinger. Liquid, there's no point in shorting the top of that. Okay, so one thing that we are seeing throughout QQQ, SPY, Tech, a lot of different symbols are showing this exact same cup and handle here. Okay, so this is really how we're going to determine the day. Whether this 20 mile range bounces upward or pushes downward. Okay, this is really going to determine where the major weight of the day goes. SPY, QQQ, SOX, they're all sharing this exact same pattern. Um, Really not a good entry on this 20 mile range because again, this can dump to the lower Bollinger while it can also push to the upper Bollinger. So I am waiting. I'm not looking for a trade on this just yet. Again, I do want to see some of the volatility stuff before we really commit to a trade on any side. We do want to be seeing the VVIX pulling downward pretty immensely here. Again, it closed at the 112. It was at the 100 yesterday, so pulled up very, very, very aggressively. We want this to pulling down very, very massively if we want to see buying to the upside. If we will be seeing continued selling here, then we will be seeing the VPIX continuing to pull upward. We will be seeing the dollar continuing to lose weight. We will be seeing the yen continuing to gain weight. So those are some of the symbols I am looking for. Now on QQQ, we might push below this lower Bollinger, and then it could create a buying opportunity to the upside. So look for that if you are looking for a scalp. The selling is starting to pick up quite a bit here. Just again, this can be a handle to this cup. I won't be buying it, but it absolutely could be. Again, we're kind of seeing that exact same structure throughout the SPY, throughout the Q, seeing the USD JPY moving downward. In this context, that's not exactly a good thing. The VVIX is still extremely elevated right now, so it's at 113. Be very, very cautious with buying the upside. Again, we want to see this absolutely melt if we're going to be seeing um, calls being bought to the upside. On Monday, no, we're on holiday on Monday throughout all the markets, so futures, crypto, everything. Um, Monday in the overnight, it will open back up, and then Tuesday will be a standard trading day. The ADL on SPY is doing very good on the 5-minute time frame. A lot of buys are coming in. Again, this can be a cup and handle. I don't think it's the smartest engagement right now, just because again, this 20 mile range can lead to a push downward, and we don't want that. Bitcoin is slowly buying up. Again, I don't put this into a one-to-one correlation with the market, but Bitcoin is very institutionally traded now, so if Bitcoin's going to be selling off, generally equities do as well. Now, CVX potentially was creating a short position here, so there is room for a scalp. Um, Not only just a scalp, but it could be a position for next week as well. So an actual swing. We have a head and shoulders forming on the hourly time frame. So with the upper Bollinger being pushed here, it can create, a very nice contract to the downside. Actually, I think I might take a look at some of those contracts. We'll look at Exxon as well because it should be pretty much mirroring that same sentiment, which it is, as that head and shoulders building pushed into the upper Bollinger. Yeah, so let's take a look. Let me go ahead and open my phone. Hold on. Look at some of these put contracts. And what I really want to target is the 20 mile. So currently the 20 mile on the daily time frames at the 141. So for next week, is there no volume on this? Is it just not loaded yet? Sorry, my options are taking a while to load. There we go. Okay. So the puts for next week are actually fairly cheap. The 148 strike is $76 per. So, and that's on Exxon. So potentially that could be a very, very nice contract. It's actually something I potentially want to engage on. Yeah, I think I am going to take those puts. So give me a moment. Let me get some stuff sold really quick. Yeah, I really like these Exxon puts. Um, these can be as a scalp, these can be as a swing. I'm going to be swinging these, so and let's go ahead and take a look at the SPY. Again, we talked about how that 20-mile range on the 5-minute time frame can be very risky. We do potentially have a micro head and shoulders forming right here as well, so just have to be very, very cautious of that. We have the VVIX still at 113.21. So again, extremely, extremely elevated right now. Just need to be extremely careful with buying calls to the upside. I will go over all the instruments here in just a second. Just want to sure that I get this these contracts that I want. There's, sorry, I'm trying to think. Okay, so the Exxon puts for next week have been purchased. Okay, cool. Alrighty. So the SPY still potentially seeing support built in here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the VVIX. VVIX is still pulling up slightly. Very, very, very cautious right now, everybody. Semiconductors pulling upward. They did have a push downward, so it does slightly invalidate this up and handle that they were building right here. Let's check QQQ. Pushing that middle Bollinger. Talked about how Oracle could potentially be short, but really don't want to be taking some of those shorts right now. Liquid is still doing very well. We are seeing a lot of buying into LMT, so this is a defensive pick. Seeing a lot of buying into Eli Lilly, which not the most defensive pick, but this is part of the defensive sector if you're looking to, you know, get out of the exposure of tech. We do have Google pulling downward, so again, this is sort of alluding to continued selling here. DXY is pulling down. Generally, this is bullish for equities, but with the unwinding from Japan, the dollar will be pulling down pretty quickly when they start selling. So that is a signal we are looking at. The FXY has been holding weight. It's not really seeing major buying or selling yet, so that that's a neutral sign. If we see this buying upward pretty immensely, then that could be a signal that the Bank of Japan is continuing to unwind. Netflix, we talked about how buying that lower low on the day could potentially be a very strong equity buy or a monthly option. Oracle still pushing down. UQQ still pushing down. Exactly why I did not want to engage calls yet, because being at the 20-mile range is really just a coin flip. Um, I don't like that. Usually I engage contracts either at the top Bollinger or the bottom Bollinger. We have socks pulling back down again. This is forming that head and shoulders I was talking about earlier. how it could be potentially forming that Head and Shoulders. So far it is, and this is definitely alluding to more blood. Yep, more blood is coming. We have Head and Shoulders here. So with that starting to form out, we should be really looking towards this 670 range on the SPY. That would be the next range downward. Again, you do want to wait for the upper or lower Bollinger to really engage on a contract. You can try to chase puts here into the downside, but it's always a risk. Generally, you don't push too low below the lower Bollinger, just like you don't push too high above the upper Bollinger. So be aware of that. TLT, we talked about how if we see buying in TLT today, that could be very indicative of continuing or continued unwinding. So that is definitely present. We have the USD JPY continuing to pull downwards, so this is a signal of the unwinding still occurring. So today is an unwind day. It looks like um, the VVIX is still pulling upward. So things are very, very bearish right now. Okay. Um, Tech contracts, not good. Okay, I would not be sitting in tech contracts. Um, the Soxal longs are actually okay right now. I'm still going to be keeping my Soxal longs. You can open SOX as calls against it. Again, this is the bear ETF for semiconductors, so you can take those $2 calls for a few weeks out to really hedge any downside. Yeah, QQQ should be making that gap that we talked about earlier at the 594. Very likely going to secure that very soon here. Now from that 594 gap, it can be a call buying opportunity to the upside. So just be aware of that, but I would not be buying calls until we tag that gap. Even though we are pushed below the lower Bollinger here. Um, just be patient as selling is aggressive. However, the HIG is still holding up very strong. Bitcoin is selling off a little bit, so there's that correlation I was talking about. ASTS is giving us that lower low of the day 2 bottom Bollinger. So again, this can be a very good swing contract. This can be a very good equity purchase. I know they've been dumping down for a while, but again, lower Bollinger buys are the time to buy. So Um, longer duration contracts on this could be very, very good. And again, same with the equity buys, can be very, very strong right now. Charter, we were talking about, I believe, is short, if I remember correctly. We were. Um, it is starting to present that upper Bollinger, so it is a, great time to short that if you want to catch the head and shoulders for that move. CVX, we are seeing it pulling down. So we did short oil on time. Let's see what Exxon is at. Exxon pulling down. So our oil short is doing great. Haven't checked the position yet, but I already know it's up. VVIX still elevated. It might be pulling downward, but again, this is extremely elevated right now. I would not be looking at calls until this really, really, really starts to drop. Okay. See, even with us pushing into this lower Bollinger here, I would not be trying to buy the call upside. Um, it's just far too risky with the VVIX being so elevated. Keep the Soxus puts going, and the reason why, um, and this is actually a really cool thing absolutely love about Soxus. Okay, so this is strike based. Okay, and let me just very, very quickly run through this. So Soxus is entirely strike based, and granted, any option out there is absolutely strike based. However, I'm going to make this super, super simple. So if you have a put, I'm gonna use cursive here, guys. A put above this level, okay, and a call below this level, then any call that is above this level, so this would be the 1.5 calls, the $2 puts, any put in this range will be in the money. It doesn't matter if the day closes at 1.9, doesn't matter if the day closes at 1.6. Any put you bought above this range will be in the money at close today. Any call bought below the 1.5 range will be in the money on close today. Um, the risk is not there in terms of the puts being pushed out of the money, and the risk isn't there in the calls being pushed out of the money on the downside. So this is something that's really interesting about smaller symbols, is that you can have some really great movement where you can buy these puts basically at the money, in the money, very, very cheaply. And throughout the entire week, they'll just chop and gain premium because they're not going to be pushed out of the money. Same with those calls, if you get the opportunity to buy those calls on the downside, because the entire week is just going to be chopping above that level, those calls will be in the money the entire time. Um, so that's something I've been really enjoying trading lately because we can get these tiny candles above this $2 range, and then you sit here and start tagging those $2 puts, a few weeks out. Those all land, sit in the money, build premium, nothing to worry about. I mean, throughout this entire sell-off, all of my SOX puts have been doing very, very well. So, um, very strong position, especially for smaller portfolios. This is something that is just absolutely iron because the type of downside on one of these puts is, for example, you could buy one of these puts, let's say for $25, right? The 0.25. Well, the whole downside on that put might be a whole 6 cents or, 0.06, a whole 60 cents, you're not going to be losing a whole lot of money. You might be losing $6 off of that contract compared to the whole contract going to zero. Um, so the upside from that put is that can push downward quite a bit. Um, the upside from that call is that you can push upward quite a bit. As long as you buy above that range or below that range, then you're going to be good. And a lot of different symbols can reflect the same type of um, premium is that they're locked to strikes, so all the options are set at $2 or $1.50. Nothing in between here. So you do have a lot of room to kind of maneuver things. Now we are seeing buying within the SPY off that lower Bollinger. Again, I did not feel comfortable buying it. Um, I still don't. The VVIX is extremely elevated still. It is pulling down, but again, this is still super elevated. Currently, I'm only buying the calls and puts. I haven't been actively, being the dealer on that side yet. I used to for a while, but recently I'm not doing that. Currently, I've just been going between those strikes. So let me just pull this up a moment. So basically, I've just been going. My drawings don't work. I guess my drawings don't want to work on me. Oh well. Okay. Anyway, um, oh no, there it is. I've just been buying above this range or below this range. So, for example, if we have um, a major bull push to the upside throughout the tech and SPY and everything, that'll push SOXS downward. Now, that gives you range on SPY and tech upper Bollinger moves to buy calls while it's underneath or even at this 1.5 strike range because it's the likelihood from the upper Bollinger is it's not going to continue pushing that position out of the money. So you're going to be sitting in the money very, very likely on that call, throughout the entirety of that call. Same with the put. And the put on Success is a lot safer because you have to remember these are kind of inversed. So puts are calls, calls are puts. So the puts here are sort of like tech calls, semiconductor calls. A lot safer to take because again, markets are bullish majority of the time. I forgot the exact percentage, but it's over 70% of the time markets are in a bullish stance. So we should be mostly being in bullish positions for the majority of the time. However, again, that is how you can trade it. Um, I really like when we have these little sell-offs because we get these nice candles upward for the 1.9 $2 range, and that gives us really, really cheap puts to engage on and still sit in that safe range of all that premium. So that's how I've been playing it. Um, this does move around a little bit if we leg upward towards, say, the $2 range to the 2.5 range, then you just have to move this whole operation upward a little bit, but that is how you do play it overall. That cup and handle did invalidate, so I do want to make sure that we show that. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. What I was talking about with those success positions is that it works a lot different than, say, like a QQQ put or a call on this because every single penny here is being tracked. Where, yes, every single penny is being tracked on these smaller symbols as well, but the real movement is based on the strike. Um, Entirely strike based. So if you can secure those strikes that I talked about, then you're going to be holding the majority of the delta within that contract. So even if the IV tapers out, even if different Greeks start to taper out on that contract, the delta is still going to be very, very strong on it. So it's going to hold a lot of weight, which means that your downside is very limited. So, a great example is say you're a smaller account and say you only have, I don't know, let's say 400 bucks, okay? Well, if you could buy 10 of those contracts, 20 of those contracts, and say you can buy 10 of them at point 0.2 each, so $20 each. Well, would you rather have a potential $6 downside to each of those contracts where you can still cut the loss for $14 a piece and be out the 60 to $120? Or would you rather be in QQQ contracts where those could literally go to zero, on the wrong move? So for smaller accounts, it's definitely a lot safer. Um, because again, smaller accounts, it's all about preserving. Every single penny you earn is massive. Every penny you can save is massive. Our Soxal calls are still doing good. Sox says doing good. Go ahead and look at the VVIX. Still extremely elevated again. As bullish as the market might look, in terms of some of this buying, it's still within a selling posture. Especially with QQQ not securing that 587 range. That is very, very concerning. Absolutely should take that range. And it did extend this selling channel that we talked about. So with that selling channel extended, The downside is actually perfectly monitored within this channel. So definitely can be anticipating that. Might seem like it's far away today, but um, having another negative 2% day is not the most unreasonable thing in the world. Let's go ahead and check the dollar and all that good stuff. Bitcoin is seeing some buying, so that is bullish for the market. DXY is rising, which generally is not bullish for the market, but in the current sense it is because when the Bank of Japan is unwinding, they're going to be selling securities for dollars, USD. That pushes an influx of USD into the system, which drops the DXY. So with the DXY increasing, that's showing that there's less dollars in the system, which potentially means that the Bank of Japan is easing up. Okay. The yen, we're seeing pulled downward slightly, so it is starting to lose its strength slightly. Um, this is also indicative that potentially the Bank of Japan can be easing in terms of continuing their intervention. We're seeing HIG holding pretty steady. And let's see, liquid. Liquid is still holding very steady. Excuse me. Oil is selling off. I'm sure our positions are probably doing good. I haven't checked them yet. What is Exxon at? 150. So our shorts are still up. DVIX is continuing to increase. So again, that is the most bearish signal you can have. TLT is seeing a little bit of bearish structure here, but overall still bullish. We did talk about how TLT can be a short right now. Not something I'm going to engage on, but the potential is there. We are seeing SPY starting to pull down a little bit, so again, I really do anticipate it tagging this 670 range, especially since it broke a lot of that earlier structure from the morning. That could have been bullish. And on top of that, with the VVIX just going absolutely crazy right now. I mean, it's continuing to rise. Um, the selling is not stopping here. Okay, so I would not be in calls. Um, these SOX puts, you can start closing them for the day if they're for today. I would not start closing the ones later for the next few weeks though. Again, Success is still going to be holding strong within that range, even with this selling here. So the opportunity for those puts to regain a lot of their weight is very, very possible. So no, I'm not going to be closing my SOX puts on in the dated positions at all. Yeah, QQQ should definitely sell down here. Very likely that push upward was to create a short opportunity. Um, Technically, that would have been a very, very, very good short entry. I did not catch it. I was too busy monitoring everything, but that would have been a very good short entry. You can see why I did not want to take that scalp. Yes, there was upside to it. Yes, you would have profited quite a bit, but you would have had to be very, very quick on it. Um, Not exactly the type of positions I like. Sometimes I like those positions where you can really just, go guns blazing, but um, being able to have a little bit more relaxation within your trading day will make your life a lot less stressful. So if we can have positions that aren't super stressful, that is always a positive. Exxon continuing to pull down. Again, looking very good. We're looking for not really the 5 mile since we're already rejecting this 5 mile range. We're looking for the 20 mile. So we're really looking for that 141. Um, again, the oil sector has not really tested the 5 mile support in over or the 20 mile support in over a month now. Um, Granted, the 20 mile does not have to be tested every month, but that is why it is called the 20 mile. It is generally tested every 20 sessions, so we are in need of a support test fairly soon here, and it is something I've been looking for, especially in WTI. Finally got that candle downward in WTI. This is a daily time frame, so this is coinciding with, again, that oil dip. WTI will be a very good buying opportunity both at the 20 mile and if we can get to the lower Bollinger again, it will be a very strong buying opportunity there. US JPY seeing a little weight gain today. So again, this is just the Bank of Japan unwinding positions. Semiconductors are strong. This is really what I've been trying to talk with the group a lot about is that we've been noticing that, and by we, um, me and some of the more experienced traders in the group, we've been noticing that a lot of this Bank of Japan selling has been directly timed into strong buyers. Um, as you can see, we have Bitcoin starting to buy upward. Um, we're even having buying on the day when we had 2 days of some very, very serious selling. So buyers are still here. Buyers are still very ravenous, but the risk is there. They are absolutely selling into buyers. It's just we always have to be careful because if there's ever that moment where the buyers taper out, that's when you start getting those massive candles downward. And that's kind of like what happened yesterday. We had a little bit of buying occurring, but it was just a lot of chop. And then finally dumped down. Buyers just no longer were interested in that level, could not push top of that cup, and just full on rejected. RSP is seeing some weakness today too. This is the SPY equal weight, so it isn't gaining the entire tech weight, but this being weaker is showing that there is selling within the market. And take a look at Netflix. We talked about how Netflix today could be a very, very quality equity buy. Hopefully some of you were able to catch that. I only bought 2 shares. I mean, not much, but just slowly adding to my long portfolio. I like to do that when I see companies drop. I'll add, it depends on the share price and everything and how much I like the company, but I'll just add a few shares, maybe 100 shares, maybe only 10. Um, but it all adds up. It all increases your growth overall. So don't be afraid to buy companies you see that are good, even if you don't have the full amount to buy a full share. There's been plenty of times where I've bought companies on fractional shares. It all adds up the same. VVIX still extremely, extremely elevated today. And I'm really not liking calls to the upside here. The risk is just extremely high. Exxon finally within the red. Let me go ahead and check my puts. Should be up slightly. Yep, I am up 22% currently. How is everyone else doing with their trades today? So HIMS is something I've been looking at for quite a while now. However, it's really, really, really hard to buy this dip. Um, just because the company has gone from literally 72, $73 a share all the way back down to 16. Now, that doesn't make it a bad company. That doesn't make it a failing company. We've seen this situation happen before to companies that are absolutely booming. Here is a perfect example. Um, my buddy and I were actually trading when this went down to $3 a share, and I wish we bought the dip, but there was a very, very, very large thesis for a long time that Carvana was going to be entering a bankruptcy. They were already signing the paperwork and everything um, for that. So we saw the share price drop all the way from three something down to that $3 a share. Um, just because a company looks beat to trash does not mean it's a bad company. Those $3 shares went all the way up to almost $500 share. Okay. Um, that's life-changing money. I mean, if you could have even bought 100 of those shares at the time, you'd be a very happy camper. So, um, never really count companies out. If you see quality dips, it's always good to add. You never know what type of companies are going to absolutely blow up on you. Here's another good example, FLNC. We actually did buy the dip on this for quite a while. We bought it back when it was at, I want to say $7 or $8 a share, around this range. Um, we started adding in there, and it did jump all the way up to 30 something dollars a share. I did sell some of my shares. I do still have some of my shares, but again, just another example of how a, 5, 6, $7 company can suddenly shoot up. Um, Another example is on Tesla back when it went down to either 60 or $70 a share. Um, I want to say it was back in here. It says 100 and something dollars a share. It was really low. It was like 160 something a share. So maybe it was back in here. Um, Back in here, I told people buy this dip. Tesla's not crashing. People were expecting Tesla to go down to $60. They were expecting it to absolutely just dump. Well, you know, did buy the dip there. It ran all the way to almost 500. Um, from that top again, creating more bullish structure and, continuing to push upward. Last example I'll show this before I'm done hammering the point in is Soxel. During the massive dump, um, during January, Soxel went down to 5, 6, $7 a share. I don't remember the exact share price, but we were starting to buy at this $13 range because it pushed the lower Bollinger. Potentially this was the bottom of the selling. Well, it sold down even more, and we absolutely loaded. I had over 7,000 shares at one point. I sold pretty early into the run. Um, I'm not gonna lie, I sold very early. I regret it, but there was a lot of narrative that was coming out about potentially China and Nvidia that really shook me out. It taught me a good lesson that narrative really doesn't matter a whole lot. You should just focus on the chart. Um, and those, 7,000 shares would have been worth a heck of a lot. So, um, yeah, always buy dips on companies if you see them. Yeah, I do apologize for some of the bullishness earlier this week. Yesterday, I don't want to say yesterday was a hard day. It was just an unexpected day. And the reason why it was so unexpected was purely because of that morning movement. And let me really show this within the VIX. It's that, let me see, I want to make sure I'm on the right day. It was right in here where We were chopping down from the 102. I want to say it opened basically right at 103, and we saw the VVIX dropping all the way down towards the 100. I want to say it got down to the 112, something like that. Um, this was showing very, very good signals that it was about to taper off towards our very, very crucial level, below that 98 range. On top of that, we were also seeing some very bullish structure within um, the SPY and QQQ, and that was right here that potentially we had a cup and handle forming. Is that potentially we were forming this cup to the upside? Um, from that push upward, which we did have this small cup form right here, we were looking for the handle downward. So many of us did short here. We just did not take the entire short all the way down. Many of us closed around, I want to say the 692 range. Um, did not get the whole short, okay? But around this range is when we started cutting because the VVIX started dropping when we got to this range. And when we cut our puts, the VVIX suddenly started to just rocket upward. Um, right in here, as you can see, it had that push upward slightly, pulled downward, which told us that yeah, the puts needed to be cut out. It's time for calls. This is going down below that 98 range. So we were fully anticipating the bullish upside, and then all of a sudden this happens. Um, Very unexpected. And then not only was that unexpected because of that, it was unexpected because we saw the HIG being very strong. Again, generally the HIG likes to sell off if there's going to be large equity sales. However, the HIG is based in the United States. It's a domestic investment, for the most part. Same with Liquid. Liquid showed a lot of strength. It's showing strength today. Um, it's largely US investors. Now, the difference is that what happened to us wasn't a domestic event. It was from the Bank of Japan. So they weren't selling off HIG. They weren't selling off high yield corporate bonds. They weren't selling off these investment grade corporate bonds. They were selling off securities. They were selling off their equities. They were buying the dollar. As you could see, the dollar was dropping very drastically, which shows that they were selling a lot. When the dollar drops, that's showing there's more dollars in the system. And they were buying the yen. Go to the FXY. I can find where F is because I am blind. And they're buying the yen. Um, this is entirely foreign, so this isn't domestic purchases, which is why it was a little harder to track. Um, if it was coming from, a domestic point of view, we would have seen a lot different signals. We would have seen the HIG start dropping. We would have seen liquid start dropping. We would have seen um, TLT, especially with some of the very, very hawkish news we had yesterday, we wouldn't have seen the buying we're seeing. So this is telling me this is still foreign investors, rather than domestic investors. So really, I attribute a lot of that selling to the Bank of Japan. Um, it's hard to catch those type of events, and maybe I just need more experience with that, but very, very difficult. You have to understand a lot of macro conditions all in the exact right moment to catch those perfectly. Let me check Riven. I believe Riven just had an earnings not too long ago. Might have even been this week if I remember correctly. So yes, I am pulling up the weekly time frame. Yes, it does look very flat, but that is not what I'm looking for. I believe Riven has done reverse splits as well. Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking Molnar or Molnar, whatever that company was. Um, what I do see with Riven though, Rivian, is that we're seeing a upper Bollinger day one push. Okay. Generally, from the day one push, you can anticipate a day two upper Bollinger push, which means that you should see a higher high from this. With the upper Bollinger being at the 1706, I would fully anticipate you pushing all the way to the 1825 range, form some bullish structure in here, and from that, make sure you remind me, and we'll go over it again because on the daily time frame, you have a very dangerous head and shoulders. Okay, this might be saying that the company is going to go to doom. I have no clue yet, but that's very scary. Okay. Um, what isn't scary is that this can pull upward and form a cup to the upside. Okay. Seeing some of this bullish action here isn't a bad thing. This is, very indicative that it's going to start seeing bullish flows. However, look at the ADL on the daily time frame. Even with this huge candle upward, the ADL is not moving up. This is still showing weakness throughout the symbol overall. Even on the 4-hour time frame, you're seeing the ADL continuing to push downward. So not a lot of strength here. Even though you might secure that upper Bollinger day two, I would rather short into that rather than try to take a call or even shares into that upside. So shorting the day two upper Bollinger, in my opinion, could be a lot better. Those coin calls would have paid off for the week, funny enough, even though the IV on them might have been toast by now, but 160 strike is being hit, oddly enough. LMT is still strong. So again, LMT is a defensive, and I don't just mean that in the sense that they sell military equipment and everything. They're defensive in terms that it's a company that will never go under. They're backed by the United States, so it's almost like an equity version of a treasury. Um, it's where you put a lot of your equity value in. Excuse me. You put a lot of your equity value into these type of companies when you're seeing weakness throughout the rest of the market. Let's check charter. I hope some of you guys took those short positions there. We did talk about it. Um, Again, you would have had a whole $4 of downside so far. So very good position there to take. I did not take it, but it was there. We talked about Ella Lilly, how that could potentially be a really good position to the upside, but I don't like engaging the middle Bollinger. Oh, excuse me. I apologize for yawning. And I hope some of you were able to buy the Netflix dip. May not be done dipping yet, but I still like the share price quite a bit, especially with all the different conditions we talked about earlier. Same with silver. Silver is still a dip to buy. If you want contracts on silver, nothing short term. It needs to be at least a month out. SOX says, or SOX is seeing some strength, so that's good. TLT pulling back very slightly. EVIX still absurdly elevated, so just don't trust any of this bullish price action yet until this thing pulls down. I know my streams are a little different than some others though. Um, I'm not really the type of person to try to sit here and force plays or anything unless I really, really see something that catches my interest. Um, I will just sit here and shop around the entire day, watch market conditions, and see if I find any trades. Um, I don't really chase momentum plays in terms of like meme stocks and things anymore. I know some do. Some do it very successfully, and that's great, but not for me. I prefer to watch the entire world, listen to all the world events, monitor the central banks, all that good stuff. Eventually, I will be teaching classes. I currently don't have my PC entirely hooked up. This is still my laptop, so once I do get my PC hooked up, once I get the whiteboard and everything set up in the room, I will be doing afternoon teaching classes on, going over the moving averages, the Bollingers, all sorts of different things. Really not seeing any great trades throughout the SPY yet. This is just a lot of chop, a lot of selling into buyers. Seeing the downside within oil that we want to see. The VVIX is continuing to rise. Remember, this isn't the same as the VIX, so this isn't just people buying puts. This is people that literally have positions that are worth millions or billions of dollars that are putting insurance on them. Okay, so this is big money moving. If this is increasing, this is a very, very real signal. This is something that retail does not have any influence in, unlike the VIX. You can see the VIX actually move purely from retail movement, whereas the VVIX is purely institutional movement. So I tend to watch the VVIX a lot more. Every single penny in here matters. So, um, for me, it's a very, very key signal to watch compared to the VIX. We can have an elevated VIX while still having a very bullish market. Um, we will never have an extremely elevated VVIX with a buying market. We might be seeing a little bit of bullishness within the price action right now, but very, very likely this does sell down into the day. It very, very likely will sell down into those supports we talked about earlier. We're seeing the HIG still very, very strong. So again, really alluding to um, foreign investors doing this selling rather than domestic, which that's always good. Domestic buyers will always be stronger than foreign buyers. Domestic sellers will always be stronger than foreign sellers. So, um, a lot of this Bank of Japan selling can be bought up. Okay, so that's really what we're looking for is are we just going to sit here and chop between the Bank of Japan selling into buyers all day, or are we going to see Bank of Japan finally taper out of that selling and buyers finally overwhelm the, the previous sellers? So really that's what we're watching for. Not rushing any positions yet. We have some puts on oil that are doing very, very well right now. Not interested in exiting those currently yet. Really just going to allow those to sit the entire weekend, swing through the weekend, and see some of this downward support that we're expecting in oil. Bitcoin is still very bullish right now, and correlation between Bitcoin and the overall equity market is very strong. Bitcoin's pretty much all institutionally owned now, so um, again, it's a very institutional instrument compared to what it was. So let's take a look at the VIX. Okay. The SPY can start rising to all-time highs while the VVIX is elevated. Okay. What the VVIX being elevated means is that big money is putting insurance on their SPACs future vehicles. These future vehicles are generally very large, um, derivative setups that are selling between the calls and the puts or, the buys and the asks. And they're very large instruments to capture both the upside volatility and the bottom side volatility to keep the price action within a certain range for the day. Okay. These instruments can be literally multiple millions of dollars. They could be hundreds of millions of dollars. I've seen multiple of them be within the billions of dollars on the day. When you see the VVIX moving up, this is purely those investors buying insurance. Okay. Um, so what this means to me is that there's risk that is real. There's risk that big money that knows how to trade very, very well sees is real. This can move downward very slightly, and we could see the SPY pull all-time highs. However, that risk is still very real. This might stay elevated the entire time the Bank of Japan is selling. Um, that's hard to say, but all we do know is that the top echelon of investors are seeing that there's some very, very serious risk going on right now, and that they're willing to spend a lot of money on that risk. Okay. As this starts pulling down, that is showing that the risk is lowering, but it's not out of the system all the way. You really, really, really have to break this 98 range to really suggest that, okay, the risk is out of the current short-term future. Now we can sit in this neutral range, pay a neutral insurance rate, things are back normal again. Okay. Um, if there's a lot of equity buying, this is kind of the inverse um of what a lot of people think volatility is, but there's actually negative volatility as well. So negative volatility runs within this green range where basically the insurance price is cheaper than the actual equity price. Um, which is why you can see a lot of these volatility pops because when the insurance price becomes so cheap, the contrarian bet becomes worth engaging upon. So I know that doesn't exactly answer the question, but hopefully this gives you a better understanding of what this tool is actually doing. Um, we can see a massive leg downward. It can push us into all-time highs, but this is still telling us that there's some serious risk here. Very happy to hear that. Always love to hear when people are able to have successful trades. Now, again, we are seeing buying within the SPY. Um, it's not something I like, and that has nothing to do with bias. Okay, I'm not saying that from a bias point of view. I'm saying that purely from the ADL. The ADL is super weak in here. Okay. Overall, this is a downtrend. Again, the ADL is like a bank account. If you see this moving upward, then funds are actively moving into this. If you see it moving downward, then funds are actively leaving it. We're seeing funds leaving and exiting it in both directions. So Nothing concrete in here. No major buying candles in here to suggest that the buying is massively going to be picking up yet. And again, we still have extremely elevated VVIX. It is pulling downward. That is good. We want to see it pull down massively. Again, this can move a whole $20, $30 within a day. So if this is the end of the volatility, we will leave this red range. Okay, that's what I was really expecting earlier in the morning, yesterday until we had the selling massively pick up. We have to pull back down towards this 98 range. Okay. Um, you still can see all-time highs while this occurs, but this is not telling you there's a strong buy in here until that happens. QQQ sitting below the major consolidation range right now, so it can use that as a bounce downward or a rejection downward. So pull up, that's the price, and then reject. So be cautious of that. Yeah, that's a very large possibility right now. Netflix seeing some buying, so that's good. Hopefully some people were able to enter into that. Pig is seeing quite a bit of buying right now, so that is a bullish signal. We're still seeing Bitcoin buying up massively. If we held those coin calls, we would have been up immensely, so that is unfortunate. Applied Materials just doing what it's doing, holding a ton of weight. Carter's still a good short. FXY not seeing massive buying, it's just kind of holding weight right now. Pig is still buying to the upside, so very, very good. And Liquid is also reflecting that as well. Talked about how Micron could be a very good buy today. Did give us that opportunity. We missed it though. Look for this rejection potentially up here. It will be right below the 605 or yeah, the 605 range. So if we're going to have that rejection, it will be coming literally any second now. So be prepared for that. On the 5-minute time frame, we are above the upper Bollinger. So potentially this is a very strong short here. Okay. We still have an extremely elevated VVIX. It is pulling downwards slightly. However, again, still extremely elevated. Um, Today's buying can swing downward very quickly. We are starting to reject this channel. It's not entirely rejected yet, but again, this short position looks very good here, so hopefully some of you take it. I personally can't because I have to get my daughter ready soon, but some of you guys should absolutely have some super banger puts out of that. And where you take it to, as always, depending on how many puts you have, I know not everyone can have a whole bunch of puts going at the same time. However, if you're able to have at least 2 to 3 puts, that's ideal. That way you can at least take major profit at the 20 mil. And if we're going to have the continued rejection downward, then you could start writing down towards the lower Bollinger. Now again, if we have our major rejection here, this is looking like a 604 all the way down towards that 687 range today. Seems like a very large move downward. However, that's fully within question. We can absolutely push this 596 again as well. Um, the other concern that I would be having is if we don't reject here, if we push upward through this, then things can absolutely turn very bullish because this is a consolidation channel. And how consolidation channels generally work is you trade from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top. So if we're going to claim this channel, then potentially we have a ton of room upward, but we have been sitting underneath this channel for quite a bit, and this channel is sitting on top of, I believe, a larger head and shoulders, if I remember correctly. Yeah, you have a bit of a head and shoulders here. You have a bit of an inverse cup. So this can turn very bearish very quickly. Oh, excuse me. Now, if we continue seeing the VVX pulling downward, that can be indicative that things are getting bullish. But right now, again, it's still above that 100 range, and I'll be right back. All right, I am back. Sorry about that. Um, anyway, with that said, yes, we're seeing the VVIX pulling downward. I'd be very, very cautious here. Again, using the 5-minute time frame, we are on the lower Bollinger of the VVIX right now. This can just continue pulling downward, or this can swing back upward very quickly. So be very, very, very aware of that. Go ahead and check the QQQ. So far, we are seeing a rejection of this range. If we see a continuation of this, this is going to start turning pretty bloody. So, um, hopefully some of you were able to take those puts. I really want to hear about some of you having some absolute banger, you know, 10-point puts. So I'm really mad we did not keep those coin calls because we would have profited on them. Shame on us. The treasury's still looking great. USD JPY starting to pull up slightly. Again, this pulling up in the short term is somewhat indicative of bullishness. VVIX is bouncing off of that 5-minute lower Bollinger, so caution with that. We are starting to see the QQQ pull down slightly. Apologize if you can hear me chewing. I'll turn off my mic if it's that terrible. But I am starving right now. Pig still doing good. Talked about ASTS, how that could be a very, very potential buying opportunity from that lower low today. Did hit the lower low, did create the buying opportunity. So hopefully some of you guys were able to play that. There's been an absolute absurd amount of opportunities today, so um, just gotta jump on them. Nvidia starting to sell off pretty aggressively, so this is, you know, correlating with the selling on QQQ that we're expecting. Should be an absolutely awesome put. Um, really wish I could have played it, but I have to get my daughter ready soon for school. BVIX still continuing to pull upward. Our Exxon puts are still doing very good, and I still see a lot of downside to oil right now. Now these QQQ puts, if you took them, don't have to really worry about exiting them until closer to this 600 range. Personally, I would really try to push under that. The VVIX is super elevated today. There's a lot of signals that the selling really hasn't eased up yet. Starting to see Bitcoin lose some weight as well. QQQ put still going good. Okay, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and end the day very soon here. If you have any questions, now's a really great time before I head out. But again, we just have to be very careful with today. EVVIX is super, super, super elevated. We do have semiconductors doing strong though. Applied Materials had a very good earnings, so that can be countering some of the selling weight. Again, you can see how some of the selling is being bought up. So the Bank of Japan is really trying to sell into buyers. They're really not trying to just dump the market. What else? We have our 10-year treasury yield pulling down very aggressively, which that's bullish. That is good. That is something we want to see overall. Liquid and Hig have been holding strong, but again, I do attribute that a lot towards the fact that I think a lot of this selling is not from, domestic investors, but more foreign investors from the Bank of Japan rather than a lot of United States investors just absolutely dumping positions. Usually, if we saw United States investors dumping positions, we would be seeing not only the Hig dropping very, very aggressively, but we also see generally the Soxel shorted very, very hard. And the reason why Soxel is shorted is because it has global exposure. It's not just exposure to US investments. Soxel has TSM, Applied Materials, all sorts of different companies throughout the globe. So generally, if there's a very, very large market short going on, most of the shorts really try to hammer Soxel. It's generally one of the most shorted positions on the market when there is a major sell-off. So that's something I always try to watch for is if we're starting to see massive, massive selling flows into Soxel, then I start looking for, larger selling throughout the majority of the market. Generally I see it kind of swaps because sometimes we'll have SPY lead the Qs, sometimes we have the Qs lead the SPY. What I've been noticing over the last probably 2 to 3 weeks is that generally the Qs have been leading the SPY. Um, Again, it does shift. Sometimes it can shift kind of on the drop of a hat. Um, but that's what I've been noticing over the last few weeks is that generally QQQ tries to claim the certain move prior, and then we generally see semiconductors and then SPY take the move afterward. Y'all are very welcome. I'm very happy that y'all could join the stream. Hopefully see some profits. I know that some of you only had a neutral week because we were very bearish or very bullish within the earlier stages of the week. And yes, we did get caught off a little bit yesterday, but hopefully my explanation made some sense how it's very hard to determine major selling when it comes from foreign investors rather than domestic, because domestic investors will trigger a lot more signals than some of the foreign investors will. So, seeing some of these signals where the Bank of Japan is just absolutely unloading positions and unwinding does become a lot harder to really check and verify, because for example our credit markets right now are super strong. I mean, they're just a fortress. Nothing about the credit market right now is telling me that there's selling going on in the SPY. um just looking at these last few candles, last few days, nothing would tell me that we're near the lower Bollinger on QQQ and SPY right now. um Generally not that type of movement. Same with liquid. Liquid is telling me the exact same thing, that we are not even close to the lower Bollinger on SPY and QQQ. However, we are, um, which is telling me that really this isn't US investors. So harder to track, but we do have some tools to be able to track them next time a little better. Is that one, if we see treasuries starting to rise very aggressively while seeing the dollar pulling down, while seeing some of the credit market, um, or just seeing the credit market hold strong while that's occurring is very indicative of, there's major foreign selling. Now, today, let's see, SPY and QQQ should be dropping right now. Yeah, those puts should have been absolutely banger. Hopefully, some of you guys took them like I suggested, because you'd be up like $400 a put right now, if not more. Um, Super good positions. I mean, this was a very nice short. Um, Potentially can start cutting some of those puts here. However, you have the VVIX rising. This is exactly what you want to see as a bear. Um, Nothing about today is telling me that you need to cut those puts off. Everything about today is telling me that you can let those suckers ride and make an absolutely ton of money. Again, we should definitely be seeing the low of the day. Um, so should have given the majority of you an opportunity to short all the way from the 605 basically to the 596. So I don't know many other YouTubers that can give that opportunity, so yeah. Um, with that said, I hope everyone has a really great weekend. We'll make next week a better week. Um, Remember, Monday is closed. I still will be putting out a video on Sunday though, to just go over the week as usual. But no Monday stream. I will be streaming again come Tuesday though. So unless there's any final questions, I'm going to end it here. Thank you all so much for tuning in every day. I appreciate you all. I appreciate the comments. It's been really great for me just personally and for my health to be able to be doing these streams. I've been struggling with some very unhealthy fatigue for almost a year straight now, and it's been hard to even get out of bed. It's been hard to move. Um, but waking up really early in the morning has been working very well for me. And being able to get up and do these streams, being able to actually sit down and trade, which I haven't been able to do in a year now. um, has been very, very nice. So hopefully, even if you didn't have the best week this week, you will want to stick around for next week because we will all get rich together. So that's the goal. Anyway, have a good day, everybody. Take care. Have a great weekend. Let me see if there's any questions. Yeah, those puts should be absolutely banging today. I'm upset that I didn't have time to take it, but there's so much downside on those puts. Looks super, super, super strong. Um, but yeah, have a great day, everybody. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you all on Sunday. Take care.